Welcome to Political Concepts 2021, the graduate student edition. My name is Felicia Denaud, a rising sixth year in Africana Studies at Brown University, and I'm a member of the organizing committee. We began dreaming up this meeting in January 2020. This was just before distance and digitalism became our disciplining conditions, so to speak. We conceived of the call for papers in a context where we would not only study together, but laugh and eat and be together. And if you know political concepts, you know how important it is to be together. The times demand something different of us. Transmission, rebellion, death tolls rising, the question of fascism, a settler colony on the move, and another summer on fire. Intellectual hoarding, airstrikes, rent strikes, the ongoing conversion of earth powers into war powers, survivor's guilt. The times demand something different of us. But what stands eternal, perhaps, is that students have something to say. These graduate students have something to say. Most remarkable is, despite having been proposed in the before times, offered up within a different political matrix, each concept seamlessly meets, disturbs, peels open the questions we now face. These concepts are nimble, precisely because they intervene at the level of founding forms, compulsions, and desires. These concepts are alive. And I'd like to give two examples of the kinds of intellectual and emotional growth spurts I've experienced through two of the featured concepts. And this is just through the proposals. So one, I, like many with family and friends and people in what is now called the Global South, have been concerned with vaccine distribution and the ongoing relationship between intellectual hoarding, market regulation, and the power to let die along the global color extraction line. Just 10 countries account for 3/4 of the 191 million COVID-19 vaccinations that were given through mid-February. Christopher Yates's work on the concept of collecting and the collector-hoarder dyad specifically has opened, just in its proposal, ways to complicate, unsettle the coloniality of collection and my own invocation of hoarding. Christopher writes, the figure of the collector is often shadowed by its negative, the hoarder, who has ceased to discriminate and instead accumulates, as mere matter, all that which cannot be justified by any form of use whatsoever. How does the collection function as a form or vehicle of knowledge, which exceeds, rather than merely caricatures, the logic of commodification, unquote. Collection beyond or an axis of commodification. I feel seen. Two, in quiet moments, my mind sometimes trails to George Floyd's final cry for his mother. Mama, mama, I'm through. I myself am a new mother, and I imagine this has something to do with why and how his cry stays, why it is an echo, a vocal impression that I must keep, and why I am so haunted by what that cry means in terms of who any of us can ever be. And you know what? It is Deborah Frempong's work on co-presence, quote, that which makes subjects mutually accessible to each other through chills, shivers, tingles, premonitions, and possessions, a haunting sensation. That has helped me place and hold the cry. Deborah prompts us to approach presences as a substrate of relation, a cry that makes and unmakes my world. Now, this is all to say that just sitting with the concepts our speakers have offered up has already started to seep into my own thinking and feeling. And these are all connections and directions I've drawn simply by reviewing proposals and having discussions. Imagine what is to come. And I know my co-organizers share this excitement. And so one task that we took up was to find a conference image that captures the feeling of it all. I, at the suggestion of Denise Ferreira da Silva, have been thinking with the elements for some time. How delighted I was when my co-organizers settled on fire.
Thank you so much, Felicia. May we have the slide, please? We chose this painting last fall after a summer defined by fire, inspired by the images of burning forests and police precincts that continue to dominate the news. Fire in that moment represented hope and despair. It signaled a future both radically new and irreparably slated for disaster. This ambivalence is captured by the figure in the painting, engaged in an act of domestic tending amidst the backdrop of devastation. Uncertain as it is whether the fire is approaching or receding, we may choose to read this as either a hopeful or futile act. Or we may avoid neat interpretation and embrace this temporal suspension as that which we, as students, are perhaps uniquely equipped not only to name or narrate, but to cultivate in the process of making meaning. The concepts presented this week will do just that and demonstrate the generativity of ambivalence for tracing the fraught necessity and inherent difficulties of forging collectives within systems premised on the unequal distribution of both harm and care. Concepts such as progress, co-presence, and transition will present and explore this tension in part as a contest over time, and will evaluate how we position the conflagrations of the past and present to trouble normative conceptions of history, ontology, and crisis. As our presenters this week will engage, all of our presenters this week will engage, if even indirectly, with the myriad concepts with which we have all had to contend this past year. In many ways, the pandemic has demanded a renewed analytic precision towards concepts, particularly those that have emerged and transformed to articulate and justify how ill-equipped our government has been in handling a crisis of this scale. We have seen the way objects like masks, for example, become concepts in the very process of their politicization. We saw essential worker emerge to name an ostensibly new category of laborer. As a concept, this signified a laudable indispensability, but in daily practice, these connotations unraveled to reveal that to be essential under capitalism is to be disposable. As a laborer, this figure is new in name only, but as a concept, the essential worker traffics in linguistic contradiction to illustrate structural realities with considerable clarity. In addition to rationalizing systemic failure, concepts have also emerged to account for the types of events for which the state is fully equipped to respond. In the last year, we have seen once again how legal terms like unlawful assembly and riot become tethered to the police violence that inevitably follows, collapsing the division between declaration, warning, and promise. We have watched as these combined with far more ludicrous concepts like outside agitator and blue lives, and witnessed how rapidly concepts are repackaged and deployed to legitimate state violence. Through concepts this week, such as Salah and swarming, we will explore the potency of co-optation for naming, enacting, and undermining insurgency. Concepts such as system, originary technicity, and user democracy will alight on the contradictory ways in which technology serves as a conduit for related forms of repression through financialization and surveillance on the one hand, and how technology constitutes, on the other, a foundational relation between human and non-human entanglements, emerging perhaps to articulate new possibilities for assembly. We gather together for this conference under no illusion that the crises that have defined the last year are over, and in solidarity with all those who continue to fight for breath in Palestine, India, Colombia, and beyond, amidst the ongoing ravages of the pandemic, settler colonialism, apartheid, and carceral violence. As graduate students, especially in this moment, we are aware of the limitations of academic work, and we know, to paraphrase Toni Morrison, that our work has work to do. And yet, or rather still, in tracing the obligations such limitations create, and in avowing our lack of knowledge, we also insist that the world is not reducible to what already is, but that it might and indeed must be otherwise. In doing so, we remind ourselves that fire is also a source of illumination. We remind ourselves that, as Audre Lorde teaches us, quote, "The quality of light by which we scrutinize our lives has direct bearing upon the product which we live and upon the changes which we hope to bring about through those lives. It is within this light that we form those ideas by which we pursue our magic and make it realized."
Thank you, Marah, for your beautiful remarks. And before turning it over to our first panel, just a couple of reminders. Please refer to the chat box for instructions, links to things throughout the conference. Also, we've created a Slack workspace for Political Concepts 2021. If you haven't already, please register, and we'll put that link in the chat, and use the platform for extended conversation and as a home for resources. And then, of course, we want to extend thanks to a lot of people, the Kogut Institute and Amanda Anderson for hosting this event, as well as the following departmental co-sponsors: Hispanic Studies, Italian Studies, Modern Media and Culture, Culture and Media, and the Malcolm S. Forbes Center for Culture and Media Studies, Religious Studies, and the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs. Thank you, Damien, Lisa, Trouda, and Kit, for all of your help, your generosity, and your patience. It has been a pleasure, and just an honor to organize with you guys. Media Services, thank you for all the work you've shouldered to make this event and so many others possible. Drs. Adi Ophir, Sharon Krause, and Tim Booth, the entire Political Concepts Consortium, and all the participating institutions, thank you for the invitation to coordinate a graduate student edition of Political Concepts. Thank you for the guidance and the trust. Tate Hudson, thank you for sharing your artwork with us, for sharing fire. And thank you, of course, to our presenters. Really, thank you for being a light in a difficult year, and everyone joining us over the next 3 days. And then, of course, to the graduate student organizers, Rachel, Julia, Nick, Kristen, Jeff, Marah, thank you.